This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 2, Episode 81 of the Jumblethink Podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast, where we interview leading entrepreneurs about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, they'll share tips on how you can turn your dreams into reality too. Our guest on today's episode is Thom Singer. More about Thom in a minute. Before we get going, I want to encourage you, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, head on over there and click that subscribe button. If you are an iTunes or Apple Podcast listener, simply go to jumblethink.com/iTunes. And for Spotify, jumblethink.com/Spotify. It'll take you right to the app. You can click subscribe. While you're there, leave us a rating and review. Let us know what you think of our podcast. Now let's jump into today's episode. Hey there, welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have an incredible guest lined up for you today. Before we get going, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for today's episode, Floxy and OpportunityInChina.com. Being a small business owner or an entrepreneur can be hard. If you're like me, your own projects are often the last ones you do. This leaves you without the graphics, website, or copy you need to effectively promote your business and tell your story. Now, what if I told you that there was a better way? Our friends over at Floxy can help you with on-demand, unlimited graphic design, web development, and copywriting with plans starting at a flat rate of $349 per month with no hidden fees. Oh, and their plans are also month to month with a 7-day money-back guarantee for all new accounts. All this can be done with a 24-hour turnaround for most projects and revisions. So check them out at floxy.com. That's Floxy, FLOCKSY.com. Let them know that Jumblethink sent you.
At the dawn of the 19th century, forward-thinking people moved to the commercial centers of Europe. Moving into the 20th century, America welcomed millions into the land of freedom and opportunity. It is now the 21st century. Many of the successes and fortunes of our generations will be made in China. To learn how you can seize opportunity in China, follow the Opportunity in China podcast. The Opportunity in China podcast is available anywhere podcasts are streamed, or you can visit our website at opportunityinchina.com.
Today on the podcast, our guest is Thom Singer. I met Thom at New Media Summit. Super excited to connect with him. He is becoming a great friend of our podcast and what we're doing. Let's get to know Thom a little bit better. Our guest today is Thom Singer. Thom, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Hey, Michael, thank you for having me.
It feels like we talk often lately. Your voice is in my
Lucky
head.
Me. That's right. I feel fortunate that I get to talk to you often.
It's so good. I was on Thom's episode, his podcast yesterday recording. It's coming out. It's already out probably by now. And so we'll have links to that in episode notes so you can check that out. Thom's podcast is killer. He is a well-known and beloved speaker. He's doing a lot of cool stuff. But before we get into kind of where you are today, I want to back up and talk a little bit about your journey into entrepreneurship. So tell us that moment where you moved from, you were working kind of that corporate job, that captive employee role, and you moved into entrepreneurship. So tell us that journey.
Well, it was a longer journey before this, but on April 1st, 2009, now I want you all to think back to the early part of 2009. That was the worst recession since the Great Depression. They say April of 2009 was the worst of the entire thing. On April 1st, 2009, I got laid off from a corporate marketing job. Now, the irony of being laid off on April 1st has never been lost on me, but I was laid off, and I had been laid off before. I'd had a sales and marketing career, and I had worked for several companies. I was never fired. I was always a good employee, but I had worked for several companies that had either closed their doors locally in the city where I lived, or the company had gone out of business entirely. So it wasn't the first time this had ever happened to me, but there were no jobs. There were no corporate marketing jobs. Everybody in marketing was being laid off during the recession. And so I called my wife and I said, I'm just going to follow my dream. I'm going to become a professional speaker. And I'm pretty sure she secretly cried thinking we will lose the house. But in front of me, she was extremely supportive. And we launched that journey. Now, before that, I had wanted to do this. Like I said, I had a career in sales and marketing. And when you're in sales and marketing, you go to a lot of conferences. And I would
Yeah.
sit in the audience and watch the speaker. And I would always think, well, their job is better than mine. How do you get to do that? So this was something I wanted to do, and situation threw me into it. And I've now been doing it for 9.5 years.
Wow. I can relate to that story. That's how I got into what I'm doing today. Same thing. Recession hit, market's gone. What do? You got to go do something different, and ended up starting my own business. You must have had so many obstacles. Of course, it's amazing when you have supportive family to walk with you through that journey, but there are other obstacles. I'm sure there are fears. So talk us through, you no longer have a job. The economy tanked. You don't know when the next check's going to come or what it's going to look like. Walk us through that process of going, I'm going to create something new in this space and rebrand myself into something I've never done before.
Well, fortunately, I wasn't starting from scratch. I had already written a couple of books. I was already speaking kind of as like a little sideline business, both for free and a little bit for fee, but I was already doing it. I'd already had started to cultivate relationships and friendships with people in the speaking business. So I think one of the mistakes that people make coming into my industry, and probably all industries, is they look at it from the outside. They make assumptions, that their bias kicks in. They decide exactly what it's like, and then they jump in, only to discover from the inside the business is way different.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that because I was already kind of, I had my toe in the water, maybe just my pinky toe, but I had it in the water. And so I did have to go out, but I went from having a pretty good, corporate salary to not making any money. And it wasn't like I was suddenly a high paid speaker. I wasn't famous. I didn't have business. So it was very hard. We struggled probably for 3 years. I always say we hemorrhaged cash. We went through all of our savings. I ran up some credit card debt in order to keep the family afloat. And at the same time, it took me about 3 years to get my earning level back to where it was. Now, I didn't earn zero. I earned an okay amount of money each year, but it wasn't enough to support the life that we had. So it took about 3 years to get the income level back into the range of a corporate salary.
So in that risk and knowing that you were stepping into the unknown, you knew a little bit about the industry because you had been there. You knew the business of it. Looking back, do you think you would have done this journey again if you knew the 3-year journey it took to get to the place where you knew you wanted to go?
Yes, and I think the only thing in my life I would do differently, if you said, "Do you have a business regret?" I think I would have jumped out 10 years earlier and tried it. I think it takes time to build a business, and it's gonna take you 3, 5, 10 years to get it to where you need it to be, and so I think having started earlier would have been the only thing that would have added to it. I don't think you can I don't think I could have changed the journey, and I'm really happy with what I do now. I love what I do.
Okay, so you make this pivot out of necessity, but also out of desire. If you were looking back in your life, would you think that you've always been kind of entrepreneurially bent, or do you think that was something as you aged you grew into? Like, where did that start for you? That desire to be an entrepreneur, build your own thing, and step out and be self-sustained.
I think it was always there. I think that's a fair statement. I think I definitely had a desire. I often would be in companies and I would see things where it was, misrun or stupid mistakes were made. But the problem was is I didn't have that little piece of me to be a risk taker. I mean, if I
Mm,
look back to what I wanted to do when I was a teenager, I wanted to be an actor, and
okay.
I never did anything about it. I never took the risk. I never chunked it all and went and lived, worked as a waiter to go take acting classes. I never did that. I didn't have that ballsiness, I guess, to go and go all in. And yet, here's the worst part of that story: I grew up in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
And I never even beyond high school and some community theater, I never even tried. Part of that was my parents thought it was a really bad idea. They thought, go to college, get a degree, then if you want to do it, go try. But don't go do that. Well, I went to college, I got a degree. I didn't end up being in Southern California or New York. I ended up being somewhere else. And then I got married, and then we moved, and I had kids, and all of a sudden I was responsible for other humans.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that natural bent to dive in. I kind of was raised to play it safe, and I did. So I think I had the desire, the feeling that I wanted to go create my own way, whatever that meant, whether it was acting or entrepreneurship or whatever. But I never took action, and I didn't have a role model to say, go for it.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So I love what you said there, because a lot of people like you aren't willing to take the risk, although you were forced into it, but that opened up amazing doors, and then you chose to step into it through that. And often we give our own reasons for that. Maybe it's fear, obstacles, but a lot of times that becomes responsibilities. I've got to make sure I can provide for my family. I've got to make sure I can provide for the house or whatever I'm responsible for. And as you navigated those thoughts in your mind, what would you tell other people who go, I have this dream, I feel like I have something significant, and I know significance is important to your journey and the message you share through the paradox of potential. What would you tell them in that journey of, okay, I get it that you have a lot of responsibilities, and I get it that it's scary to risk all of the things that you know you have to provide for. What would you tell those people?
Well, I do tell, quote, little air quotes, those people all the time, because I have first of all, I have two children, and I'm trying to raise them to, not be victims. I'm trying to raise them to go out and do what they have to do and take ownership for the mistakes they make and everything else. And then I have two young gentlemen who I mentor. They're both almost 30 years old. They're both in their late 20s. They've both been around for 5 years. One found me when he was in college, the other soon after. I introduced them to each other. They're like buddies now. They call me Dad. I actually think that cool older brother is a way better nickname for your mentor, but whatever. And so I tell them all the time, don't wait till you're 50 to right the ship. Start now. Whatever it is you want to do, start making choices. And every choice that you make has consequences. And so I think that you have to realize it early. Now that I'm 50, I have a mantra that I'm going to make age 50 to 75 the best years of my life, which means I'm going to say yes to more things that I want to try and do, both in business and my personal life, and not let the little voice in my head say no and let fear take over. And so I tell, both my kids and my fake kids, I tell them all the time, figure out what you want to do and start. You don't have to go 100% in on day one, but start moving the ship towards that beacon, towards that goal that you're trying to accomplish. Because if you don't know what success looks like, it's really hard to make decisions that take you towards it.
So good. Okay, so you're a speaker. One of your main keynotes that you give is called The Paradox of Potential. You're a podcaster. You host the Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do podcast. You've authored 12 books. So when you say you've written a couple books, you've written a lot of books. And now you're doing some stand-up too, which is really cool. We're going to talk a lot about that, some of those things in segment 2. But before we wrap up this first segment, I've got to ask, your podcast is called Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. What is the cool thing you're doing that you're most excited about right now?
So that's funny. That's a question I ask every guest. What's the coolest thing you're doing in your business right now? And as soon as you asked it, I thought, boy, I have no idea. You stumped me with my own question. I definitely think the coolest thing that I'm doing is this sideline of doing stand-up, not because I want to be a comic, not because Seinfeld is nervous about job security, because I'm doing open mic nights, but I call it cross-training for my speaking career. I think if you look back at the last 4 months, and I've been doing the stand-up for 5 or 6, if you look back at the last 3 or 4 months, I think all of my appearances on stage have been better. Audience members who've seen me before, clients who have rehired me have actually pointed this out, that you were always good, but God, you were great today. What's the delta? And
Wow.
I call it cross-training for my career, because I think stand-up comedy is the hardest use of the spoken word imaginable. I can give a 90-minute speech, and if part of it doesn't resonate, people can still say, that was great. But if you're doing a 3 or 4 minute open mic night and part of it doesn't resonate, you sucked. So I think I'm learning timing. I think I'm learning confidence. I'm not telling jokes in my keynotes, but
Right.
I think that I'm learning definitely a little bit better cadence and certainly more confidence. And so I definitely think, I don't know what's going to come out of it, but when I get to 100 of these open mic nights, I think I'm going to be an overall better person, a better performer, than I was before. So I think that's pretty cool.
It's kind of putting yourself in the fire of public speaking is what comedy does. It's like the most intense furnace that you can be in.
Yeah, I've taken improv classes. I actually was in a short movie, so I've done a little bit of acting even as an adult. I did acting as a kid in school. I have done, impromptu speaking through Toastmasters and things like that. Stand-up is the hardest thing I've ever done when it comes to words.
Wow. So, taking a broader step back here and looking at what you do, whether it's speaking, podcasting, writing, or even stand up, how are you finding purpose in what you do?
I don't know that I have purpose in everything I do, but I
Okay.
definitely know that I am trying to be more fulfilled in the things I do, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
yeah.
So I'm trying to say yes to things. I'm trying to live the experience rather than just checking the boxes. And I think I spent a lot of my life checking the boxes because that's what, a good employee does. That's what a good husband and father does. That's what a good society member does. And so, I'm trying to be present more in the things that I'm doing. And my wife would tell you I'm probably not always succeeding at that, but I'm trying to live an experience a little bit better. And I have this mantra, like I said, 50 to 75 is going to be the best years of my life. Well, that's a big statement because I've had a good
Right.
life. That's
Yeah.
that's going to be tough. However, some people come to me and they say, well, what about 75 and after? What about 75 to 100? I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. I mean,
Yeah.
25 years ago, I was 27. That was a lifetime ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. And I love that concept of how you can make 50 to 75 the best years of life. We're going to definitely dive into that. For you, what is one challenge you're currently working to overcome in your own business?
Sales. I have
Sales.
I have
Okay.
built a business that is based a lot on word of mouth. Now, to me, when I started, that was a little bit of a feather in the cap. If you got up and
Yeah.
gave a speech and somebody came up and said, "Wow, that was great. Would it work for lawyers? Would that work at a healthcare institution? Could that be tweaked to work for a manufacturing company?" To me, that meant I was a great speaker because we live in a polite society, and a lot of people who give speeches think they're really good speakers because after the speech, people come up and say, "Oh my God, Michael, that was that was such a good speech." But
Yeah.
we live in a polite society. What else are they going to say to you? Think about this for a minute. You see a speaker who's highly mediocre, and now you're at the cocktail party and you're in the corner and it's just you and the speaker. What do you say to her or him? You say, "Oh, great speech," or some derivative of, "Oh, I loved that part of your speech where you talked about your sister." And the
Yeah.
speaker hears, "Wow, your speech was great." So there's a lot of people who think they're great. I was told by a mentor, the only way you know you did a great job is if somebody says, "What else can you do for me?" Which
Right.
means, could you speak for my group? Do you have a book I could buy? Can I pick your brain? Anything that translates to what else can you do for me? So for me, I always thought that if I could speak and spin off business, I was a great speaker. And I've built a whole career doing that. If I looked at my last 100 gigs, 95 of them came from someone sat in my audience and said, "We have to have him in my company."
Wow.
Or someone they know sat in my audience and said, "You have to have him speak at your association." So
So, yeah.
outbound sales is the hardest thing because I now am taking that in. I'm not going to be reliant on word of mouth. I have to get out there and go to people who've never heard of me and say, let's talk about if I can bring a solution to your organization.
So that's the challenge, but what's the next big goal you have in the business?
So everybody always is looking at how do we go up the ladder, up the ladder, up the ladder? How do we raise our fees? So many of my friends who are at X fee want to be at the next level of fee.
Yeah.
Or they're speaking to audiences of 500 and now they want audiences of 5,000. To be honest with you, I want more of what I got. I've got great clients. I'm speaking to some amazing audiences. I'm not famous. I'm not on these giant stages, but I just want more. I want my calendar full. I want to be at the point where I am turning away business. So I'm not looking necessarily to go to something bigger. I don't need to be Tony Robbins. I don't need to be a famous influencer, but I have a really good, solid career working for some great company. I spoke for a restaurant chain the other day to all of their management from around the country. And, I'm not famous. Their company's not, I think they have, 30, 40 restaurants. It's not like it was Chili's, but I got to tell you, I had a ball with these people. These were salt of the earth, great people who are doing amazing things and giving people their first jobs as servers and
Wow.
cooks, and they're changing lives. I want more people like that to come
Yeah.
encounter and work with them. So I don't have a goal of doing something giant. I have a goal of just doing a lot more of what I'm doing.
We'll be right back with Thom Singer and our second segment where we go deeper into the world of speaking, his message, the paradox of potential, and so much more. We are super excited about a new sponsor, Floxy. Here's a little bit more about them. Once again, we want to thank today's sponsor, Floxy. Floxy is your unlimited graphic design, web development, and copywriting team. It's time to stop thinking about those ideas, the next killer graphic, the next perfect website, the perfect copy for your ads, and start getting them created. Their plans start at $349 a month, no hidden fees, month-to-month billing, and you can cancel at any time. So for all of your web development, copywriting, and graphic designs, make sure you check out Floxy at floxy.com. That's FLOCKSY.com. Now let's rejoin the conversation with Thom Singer. We are back with Thom Singer. Before we get rolling, Thom, we want to make sure people know how to connect with you. Of course, the links are in the episode notes, but how can they find and connect with you?
You can always find me at thomsinger.com. That's THOMSINGER.com. You'll find all of my speaking stuff about my books. You'll find my podcast, Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do, has its own page there at thomsinger.com/podcast. And then also I'm on all the social medias. I'm a big tweeter.
Nice. And I love that you kept the H in Thom. So many people drop it. And I never understood why, if they spell it THOMAS.
Right. Thomas, almost all people you know who are Thom, most of us are Thomas. Yeah. So when they go to Thom and you draw, why do you take out the H? I just got rid of the S.
That's a good way to think of it. I love that. Okay. So much we could talk about in your area of expertise and what you do. I want to jump off right with what you talked about, how you can make 50 to 75 the best years of your life. I am still fairly young. I'm 37, and I look at life and I go, I don't know if I ever really want to retire from the standpoint of I always want to be doing what I'm loving and always creating stuff that's awesome. So tell us about that journey for you as you pivot into this next season of life where you're saying, hey, you know what? I don't have to have golden years where it paints a picture of how everyone else has done it, but I can live my life the way I want.
So I've been on this journey for a couple of years. I'm 52, and it's really interesting because as I was approaching my 50th birthday, a lot of my peers, because you grow up with people, so you're all the same age. A lot of my high school and college friends stuff. Some of them were freaking out about turning 50. It seemed like this big milestone, like, oh, I haven't accomplished enough, or it's all downhill from here. I never had that attitude. I started calling myself 50 when I was 49, and my wife was like, "You're not 50 yet," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm close enough." And I figured out what the difference was. And that was that my own dad, my father, he was 52 years old when I was born. So I want you to think about that for a minute, because when is the first memory that you have of your own dad? I mean, you're probably 5, 6, 7 years old where you start really having crystallized memories of conversations and experiences, which meant my dad was almost 60 before I really start having cognitive memories of the time we spent together. And I had a great dad. I know a lot of people have issues in situations they grew up with. And I always like to point out that, I respect and I care that people have had rough experiences and didn't have great parents. I had great parents. I had a great dad. And it was like being raised by a grandfather. He had already raised 3 people. My brothers were teenagers when I was born. My same mom, but my dad had married someone a lot younger. So they had a 9, 12, and 14-year-old at the time that I was born. And they were up and gone, all of them, by the time I was in 4th grade, which meant that, it was just me. And my dad retired when I was in 7th grade. So he coached my teams and always drove me everywhere. And then my mom got sick when I was 15 and died when I was 18. Wow. And that really bonded my dad and I, because we had to take care of her. My brothers were all living across the country and overseas. Yeah. And so my take is, and by the way, my dad lived to be 99 years old. He only died 5 years ago. So he lived to be 99, a very full life. And the only part of it I ever saw was like 60 to 99. And up
the
until
second half of his life.
Right. And up until 97, he was really spry and active and all this. The last couple of years, the human body lets you down a little bit. The last couple of years were rougher on him. But until, 97, he was up on the go. He lived on his own till he was 94.
Wow.
He had 5 girlfriends. He bowled, he golfed, he went to the racetrack, he played bridge, he went dancing. I mean, he was widowed at 70, and, we thought, oh, what's he going to do? Well, apparently he was going to do a lot. So he made 70 to, 97 the best years of his life. And so that was an example that was set for me. And so I think that's part of my mindset is this isn't old. I'm 52. I mean, my joke is that I realized I was 52. I went to my wife and said, "Oh my God, I'm the same age my dad was when I was born. We could have another kid." And my
Wow.
wife said, "No, no, 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 no. You can't find your car keys. If you lose a toddler, you're in trouble." So, but my vantage point of this is it's not old. My dad lived a very full and active life. Uh,
Yeah.
from this age forward. So that's sort of my spark of it is I have a long way to go, I hope, and I want to embrace it.
Yeah. So, so, so good. I love that because I'm a fan of that philosophy that you can live your life well through every season of life. And a lot of people write off certain stages of their life, and that's just silly. And I love that you are taking that mindset to say 50 to 75 is going to be greater than the 50 before it. All right, so let's pivot into the world of speaking. That's what you do as your bread and butter, and I love this whole concept of the fact that you stepped into this and really are owning it through this pivot in your life change from being an employee to being an entrepreneur. When you speak, there are different models for speaking, and we were at New Media Summit. We were talking about those with other people who speak, and some of those people thought you were crazy in your approach. I love your approach. It resonates most with me. So tell me, there are people that pay to play. You go pay, and then you make a whole bunch of money by upselling everyone who listens to your speech. And then there's people who go and get paid to speak, people who go and speak for free. Tell us a little bit about your model and how that works for you.
Sure. And I always tell people when we talk about the speaking business, it's not one business. It's like 10 different business models, or maybe more, maybe an infinite number of business models. But there are, celebrity speakers who make some of them make, 25 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George Bush, they get paid over $500,000 for a 45-minute speech. I don't
Yeah.
get paid, obviously, anywhere near that. So somebody said something. I said, Colin Powell is not, even though he makes his living as a professional speaker, that's what he does most days.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're not competitors. Nobody sits around a committee meeting going, should we have Thom Singer or Colin Powell?
Yeah.
For so many reasons. But
Yeah.
the biggest reason is if you have a $50,000 speaker budget, you're not looking for a speaker who's a lot less than that. You're looking for somebody who that's their fee. So you're looking for a celebrity. So there's also like you said, pay to play. There's there's the speak to sell model where you get up and you give a speech at a conference and the conference doesn't pay you, but then you pitch the audience and they run to the back of the room and they buy your coaching program or whatever it is. And then there's what I call the traditional speaking model where an association, I'm not allowed to sell stuff. They're paying me
Right.
a fee. I'm not allowed to say, run to the back of the room and buy my thing. And oftentimes they don't even want me to sell my books because they don't want
Yeah.
a speaker who's up there pitching. They want a speaker who's up there sharing information. And that's the world I live in. I get paid to go up and share, my expertise and do it in an entertaining and content rich way. And they speak and they pay me to do it because I and my peers who are professional speakers, we make the conference better. We bring the oomph to an event. And so there's a slice of the speaking world where that's what people do. There's another slice where people are consultants and they speak to be seen as the expert. So people will later call them to buy the thing. All of these are good models. One's not better than the other, but you can't really live in all of them. You kind of are in a lane or maybe two. And I just happen to live in this world where I speak to associations and corporations, about business growth, really.
Yeah. I love that the space that you're in and how it works for what you do. Because I always find it a little weird, for me at least, when I go to an event, maybe I've paid for it, or maybe most of the time I've paid to be at that event, and it turns into a sales pitch. It always just rubs me wrong because I'm like, I'm not here to be sold. I'm here to be taught and pushed and encouraged to learn more about what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and again, it's not that the conferences where everyone is selling are bad conferences. It's just a different business model. There's a lot of conferences that they don't even pay speakers. They get people to come and they say, "Oh, well, if you come speak, we have a great audience. You'll get exposure." Well, the truth is people die from exposure. I make my living as a speaker, and I can't risk it that one audience member might have a cousin or an uncle who's on an association board. I get paid to speak. Now, it doesn't mean I don't do some pro bono things for organizations I believe in, or if it's the right audience. But for the most part, I get paid to go and speak. And I get invited back a lot. And
Yeah.
part of it is because I also work as a master of ceremonies. So sometimes
Yeah.
people like to have the same master of ceremonies, 2, 3, 4. I have one coming up on 5 years because it gives a little continuity. The audience feels familiar with them. Usually you don't have the same keynote speaker back year after year, but it's happened. And so, but that's what I do. It's a kind of a one-off deal as a keynoter. You're doing this group, and then hopefully next year you're doing another group.
I know that you recently spoke at one of the TEDx's on the art of giving small, which isn't your normal message, but it was really cool. I just watched the video this morning and the story about your daughter, Kate. It's a phenomenal representation of how you can change mindset for big wins. So tell us a little bit about how you've changed your thought of how you approach business from the speaking space and made a small change that had big impacts on your reach as a speaker.
Sure. Well, let me touch on that TEDx talk really quick, and then I'll
Absolutely.
answer that question. I'm really proud of it. It's called The Art of Giving Small. And when I started making money as a speaker, even before I was full time, we made a pledge as a family that we were fortunate. I got to do what I love, and we're making money on it. We gave just a little percentage points every time I gave a speech to a fund, which eventually became 2 funds at Children's Hospital of Austin, where we live, and San Diego, where my daughter was operated on. And what we do is every time I get paid, I give a little money to them. Well, you fast forward now well over a decade, because we started this before I was full time. It's grown to over $70,000. And I call it the art of giving small, because I'm not rich. I can't write a $70,000 check to a charity. But through what we've given, through some donations, et cetera, from others, it has grown. And I always wanted to do a TEDx talk, because as a speaker, it's a credibility tool. It's like writing a book. It's like having my podcast. And the TEDx organizations, the local ones, the TEDx, typically don't look for professional speakers. I think some of my peers might have soured that in the early days of TEDx, going up and doing their shtick. And that's not what TEDx is looking for. They're looking for a unique single idea that can be shared in a short talk. And so what the advice I was given years ago was, if you're going to apply for these, you have to point out you're a speaker, because they're going to look you up online and be like, eh. So you talk about the fact that you're going to do a topic that is not your topic that you speak to audiences about. So I wanted to share this giving program that we did, because I think $70,000, I think that's a real number for a charity. I think that's real money. And I wanted to share that anyone can do it if you're just committed. I call it compounded generosity. Over time, your little generosity compounds and grows. So I'm really proud of that. So I'd love it if anyone's listening to this, jump onto the TEDx YouTube channel and look for The Art of Giving Small or Thom Singer and watch it and let me know what you think. It just came out recently. So I wanted to share that since you brought it up.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to have a link to that in episode notes, so it's super easy to jump right there. I highly recommend it, and I love that compounding giving philosophy that you have. I had never thought of it that way, and how you can give in a way that grows, and then and how that can make a larger impact when you don't have $10,000 or $50,000 or $70,000 to give at one shot. How you can use that to grow momentum. I love that.
So what was the original question before I derailed you?
Yeah, it was what's a small pivot that you've made in what you do through speaking that's made a huge difference in your life?
It's when I became a master of ceremonies. So I for years I was a keynote speaker, like just sort of in the box. And I had my topic at the time was called "Connecting with People in a Gadget Crazy World." Because 10 years ago when I started, everybody was moving to the smartphone, and everybody thought they could have a like, a link, a share, and a follow. They could LinkedIn their way to success, and nobody had to go to live events ever again, because we could just digitally make all our friends. And I didn't believe that. And there were all these tracks about how Twitter was going to change your life and you'd never have to leave the house again. And I didn't believe it. I think these are great tools. I'm a huge social media user, but I always believe that you have to have that face-to-face human touch in order to really get to that know, like, and trust that is the base of business. And I would keynote and people would say, "Oh, that was so great. I wish we could have you back next year because you changed our conference." Because what I would do is, in the middle of the keynote, I'd flip it around and say, "Hey, I have an idea. Let's use this conference as a human laboratory about how you can connect better." And then I'd give them tips for what to do at the conference. And one of my clients came up with the name The Conference Catalyst, because I changed the way people behaved. They came to network, but instead of sitting with their coworkers, they followed the advice in the keynote. And they'd be like, "But we can't have the same keynote next year." And I came up with this idea a few years ago that, well, I could come back as your master of ceremonies. And instead of giving a keynote, I can take this content about how do we really network when we're at a live event and really stand out and matter and build honest connections, not just here's my business card, let's be LinkedIn buddies. I could work that in little 5-minute chunks over the 3 days. And that started this whole arm that's about 25% of my business, where I am the master of ceremonies at events. Now I can only do about one a month versus I can do a lot more keynotes because I'm gone for 4 or 5 days when I'm the MC, which I still have a kid at home and I'm married. So I can't do a lot of them, but about, once a month would be awesome. And I'm trying to fill that calendar where I MC 1 gig a month, and I'm getting close to it now.
So good. All right. Talk to us about the paradox of potential. That's one of your core messages now. What is it? And what do you share during these speeches about the paradox of potential?
So I have gotten really obsessed with this whole concept of potential. And what I learned is we get so excited about it because I've interviewed 350 entrepreneurs on my podcast. And I have a lot of friends who start businesses, and we get so excited about the potential when it's brand new. And yet most businesses fail. Most entrepreneurs fail several times before they have a success. But wait a minute, you had so much potential when that company started. Well, it turns out that potential is not a solution.
Okay.
We get so excited. So the paradox is that we get so excited about potential, but I could put 10 people in a room who all have potential, and only 1 or 2 are going to really get far across that gap between potential and results. Well, how come? And so I have now done a survey where I've interviewed close to 500 people about, do they believe they're reaching their career potential? Yes or no? If yes, why? But if no, and most people say no, why not? And it's not a scientific survey. I'm not a PhD researcher, but the information that's coming out of the survey plus the follow-on interviews that I've done with a couple dozen people, it's phenomenal how people sort of get stuck in our careers. People feel they're stuck. The term I use is, I call it being stuck in the high middle. We reach a point in our career where once you're like a senior manager, who can you complain to that you're not reaching your potential when you're making $250,000 a year? You can't go tell your brother who's working, still at a restaurant, oh my God, I just suck. Because they look at your Mercedes and they're like, yeah, it must suck to be you. So all of a sudden people feel they have more potential, but they're in the high middle. They can't complain about it. Nobody's going to go, oh, what a shame, your golf course house. I feel so bad for you that you can't be CEO. And it's a common thing. And so I have this sort of interactive program I do with companies, and it can be a keynote for an hour. It can be a 3-hour workshop where we dive into what's holding people back, because on a team, 70% of the people tell me I could be doing more. Well, what if those numbers aren't right? What if it's just 50%? What if 50% of the people who work at your company know in their soul they could be doing more, but they're stuck? Well, what if we moved them? They don't have to go all the way across the gap. What if we move everybody just a little bit? That would be a huge impact to the success of the company. But what's holding me back is different than what's holding Michael back or Sally back. So the problem is that this is not a one solution thing. It's a discussion that has to start somewhere and be grown upon for years. And I'm the catalyst that starts that discussion inside groups.
Love that. As we wrap up this segment, what are a couple actionable steps people can take if they want to move into the space of speaking?
So if you want to be a speaker, my first question I ask everybody is, how many speaker friends, I mean friends who are making their living or a sizable part of their living from giving speeches, how many speaker friends do you have? And by friends, I don't mean, oh, I met them once and I follow them on LinkedIn. By friends, I mean, you realize that you have no plans for Thanksgiving and they invite you to join their family. That level of friendship. How many speaker friends do you have? Because, and this is true if you want to be a plumber, how many plumber friends do you have? If success leaves clues. So you have to get around the people who are living in the business to really understand what it is. Because if I hadn't joined the National Speakers Association and made friends with people who were not celebrities, I didn't stalk Colin Powell or, I know my idol in the business was an older gentleman now, but I mean, it was 30 years ago, he was like the hottest guy out there speaking and writing books, a guy named Harvey Mackay. He's the reason I'm a speaker. I looked at Harvey Mackay and said, I want to be Harvey Mackay. Well, I didn't go, I've met him and we've had dinner together and stuff like that, but I didn't go stalk him to try and make him my best friend. Harvey Mackay's not going to pick me for his best friend. And everybody runs around the celebrities going, oh, hoping that crumbs are going to fall. And for some it happens, but for very few. My thing was, I found my peers, people who were, at the time I was 40, people who were, 40 and trying to get into the business who maybe were 2 steps above me on the ladder. And guess what? They showed me the way. They gave me referrals as far as how to behave, how to do things, and they gave me referrals for actual business. So get around people who are doing this, who are at your level or a little higher, and even a little behind. Because if you're helping the people who are one step down, some of them are going to leapfrog you, and they're going to remember you helped them.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. I think that's so powerful. All right. I want to make sure people remember how they can find and connect with you. How can they find and connect with you?
ThomSinger.com. That's ThomSinger.com.
We'll be right back with our final segment with rapid fire questions and Thom Singer. Today's episode is being sponsored by our friends over at OpportunityInChina.com. Here's a little bit more about them. Have you been looking for a way to change your career or social prospects? Do you see the world around you changing and haven't quite figured out what path to take? Well, you're not alone in seeking opportunity. Visit OpportunityInChina.com for access to scholarships to attend university in China, or if you have a bachelor's degree already, OpportunityInChina.com provides access to jobs in the educational sector all across China. Working in China is not only often well paid, but it will place you among 1/5 of the world's population, boosting your social network, bringing you more deeply into the story of globalization, and opening doors you never knew existed. So seize your opportunity now. Visit their website, OpportunityInChina.com. By the way, they have a pretty cool podcast. Search for Opportunity in China Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions with Thom Singer. We are back with Thom Singer. We are doing rapid fire questions. Thom, are you ready?
I'm fastening my seatbelt and I've got a hard hat on. Let's go.
All right. What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Start.
All right.
Said to make these quick. I mean, the reality is that get out there and do something. You can always pivot, but momentum matters in entrepreneurship. So get out there and start.
What is one change you'd like to see in the world?
Respect. I think we have gotten away from general basic respect of differing opinions, of different people of different backgrounds. I think we've now dug in so deep that it's my way or the highway. I think it's ruining us. So I think we have to step back and be respectful of other people who aren't like us.
Love that. What do you want your legacy to be?
That I'm a good dad.
I love that. That's powerful. We need more people that's the legacy they live.
Well, I know this is rapid fire, but I have to tell a story. When we were at that New Media Summit, somebody was talking to me about my business model that I speak and get a check. And they're like, yeah, but you don't have anything that builds. You don't make money in your jammies. And they wanted all this stuff that I should be doing to be like them. And they said, what's the legacy? But think of it, there's nothing when you die, there's nothing there when you can't go on stage. What's the legacy you leave your children? And I said, I already have that taken care of. And they looked at me as if like I had invested in stocks or I owned a bunch of real estate. And I go, I'm a freaking good dad.
And that's a powerful thing that many of us dads overlook. And it's the journey I'm on too, is just being a great dad and making that a center core of my mission. So I applaud you for that. And thank you for being an amazing dad to incredible children. It's a powerful, powerful thing. Where do you find inspiration?
Now in nature. And I will tell you, that's interesting because I never was outdoorsy. I'm a city guy. I traveled to Paris and San Francisco and New York. And, I like to see plays and eat in nice restaurants. That's my vacations. My younger daughter is very outdoorsy and I fought it for years. And now we've been to the Grand Canyon. She and I spent 4 days in Yosemite hiking 10 miles a day. Her lifelong dream is to hike the Appalachian Trail, which is a 6-month through hike. And she's going to do it after she graduates college, which is 6 years away. And she's convinced me to go with her. So I'm going to do this in 6 years. I'm getting out a lot now, even locally on the trails in Austin where I live. And it turns out that there's a lot of inspiration in nature that I just ignored for 50 years.
Wow. So good. Appalachian Trail goes through our backyard. So you are welcome to stop in, grab whatever you need, and continue on the journey when you do that trip.
Yeah. Well, apparently you don't shower. So when I come over, we're going to stink.
That's okay. Well, we got showers. You can use them if you want. What is one book you think every dreamer and entrepreneur should read and why?
I'm going old school. I read it almost 30 years ago. And that is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. I think that it holds true today. I think it holds up, and it's the only book that I've ever read like 2 or 3 times.
Wow. How do you define success?
I don't define it by money. I define success really by joy, and I don't even know how to describe that. It's kind of that you know it when you see it.
What is one habit you find helpful in your life as an entrepreneur?
I write a lot of handwritten notes.
I love that. Like for yourself, for others?
No,
What's that look like?
Like if somebody does a favor, like if you were to say, oh my gosh, I belong to the National Association of Jumble Thinkers and we're having a national conference, I think you would be a great keynote speaker. Let me introduce you to the executive director. And they hired me. I would send you a handwritten note. I might even throw a Starbucks card in it. But I would say, dear Michael, thank you so much for that introduction. It worked out great. I'm going to be the keynote speaker. I look forward to seeing you in December, Thom. Because if you don't say thank you, if I just sent you a text that said THX, that doesn't do anything. But if I take the time to put ink to paper, you'd be surprised how many people tell me, oh my God, that's the first handwritten note I've ever gotten or I've gotten forever. So I've always done it. I'm a big note writer.
How do you start and finish your day?
I'm sure you interview these people who have these great systems and these great things that they do. They do naked yoga in 100 degrees, and then they jump into a polar bear ice bucket. I don't have any of those things. I wake up and, I play a game where I watch MSNBC and Fox News because I like to see the same story from both sides, because then I realize everyone's crazy. And I probably, spend too much time early in the morning. They say don't surf through social media. Yep, I wake up, turn on the phone, surf through media. I don't do. I know what your question is about. I do none of it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And if you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
I would go back and be the marketing director for a law firm or other professional services firm. I worked for a law firm, a bank, and a consulting firm in a marketing role, and I was really good at it. And I'd go back and do that again in a minute. I loved it.
What is one dream you are still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
I don't know that I can say. I think my dream was I wanted to work as a professional speaker and get paid to get up and give speeches. That was my dream for a long time, and that's what I do. So I don't know. I'd like to travel more.
As we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you have the final thought. So what's your final thought for all of us today?
I don't care if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 80. Make now the best time of your life.
Yeah, love that. Thom, thanks so much for taking time out, being with us today, sharing your story, and giving us insights into the magical world of speakers.
Thank you.
Once again, we want to thank today's guest, Thom Singer, for taking time out to be on the podcast. Make sure you check out the episode notes where you can find a link to that TEDx talk, his website, and so much more. Make sure to connect up with our sponsors, Opportunity in China at opportunityinchina.com and Floxy at floxy.com. Thanks for tuning into today's episode. It means the world to us that you would listen. Now, I want to encourage you to get out there, begin to chase those dreams and ideas, and change the world around you.
Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.